What would you do if, while commanding an airplane, you saw something in the cockpit that shouldn't be there? A pilot saw it for 5 seconds, and his life was never the same again. A miracle of the Virgin Mary that no one can explain. But before we continue, leave a comment saying where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I'd love to see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary are reaching. You know that kind of pilot who seems to have been born to fly? Marcus Weber was that pilot, 54 years old, 20 years flying commercially, captain of one of the largest aircraft in the fleet. The kind of professional other pilots respected, the kind passengers never noticed because everything always worked perfectly. Gray hair, upright posture, a calm voice over the intercom that made even the most nervous passengers relax. Marcus lived alone in a functional apartment near the airport. Divorced for 6 years, no children. Most of his colleagues barely knew him outside of work. He was polite, competent, but distant. His life was simple. Work, gym, sleep, repeat. Flights were his routine, and he liked it that way. There was something else about Marcus that few people knew. He was an atheist. He simply didn't believe, never had. Science, physics, mathematics, those were real things. The rest was just stories to comfort people who needed answers. When colleagues mentioned praying before difficult flights, Marcus only smiled politely. When passengers thanked God for safe landings, he thought, "Thank the engineers and 20,000 hours of training." He wasn't bitter about it. He just saw no point. And for 20 years, that worldview worked perfectly. He trusted instruments, protocols, data. And they had never failed him. Until that Tuesday in April, routine flight, Boston to Denver, 163 passengers, crew of 6, aircraft in perfect condition, weather forecast, a few isolated storms along the way, nothing a simple detour couldn't handle. Marcus conducted the briefing with his co-pilot, Jake Morrison. 28 years old, still new to the profession, but competent. A little anxious at times, but nothing concerning. "Forecast shows stable weather along the route," Jake said, checking the tablet. "Some isolated clouds, nothing significant." "Good. Smooth flight then," Marcus replied. The takeoff was smooth, a normal climb. 20 minutes later, they were at cruising altitude, 37,000 feet, clear skies above the clouds, everything perfect. Marcus activated the autopilot and leaned back slightly in his seat. Jake was making notes in the flight log. The steady hum of the engines was almost relaxing. You know that feeling when everything is going exactly as planned? When every system works, every number checks out, every green light is on? Marcus knew it well, and he trusted it. For 90 minutes, the flight went on without a single event. Passengers watched movies, flight attendants served drinks, pilots monitored instruments. Then Jake noticed something on the weather radar. "Captain, storm cell developing ahead." It wasn't in the forecast. Marcus looked. A large cloud formation was appearing on the radar, growing fast. Distance? 100 miles, but it's expanding. Marcus nodded. "Let's request a deviation before we get too close." But before he could reach for the radio, the sky ahead lit up. Lightning flickered within the dark clouds on the horizon, and then, crack! A bolt of lightning jumped from the distant storm and struck the plane. The cockpit exploded in white light. The sound was deafening. "Lightning strike!" Jake shouted. Marcus was already checking systems. Lightning from distant storms could travel miles. Positive lightning jumping from the cloud anvils. For 5 seconds, everything seemed normal. Then the screens began to flicker. "We've got electrical instability," Jake said, his voice slightly rising. "Primary system oscillating." Marcus stayed calm. He'd seen electrical failures before, annoying but manageable. Jake followed the procedure. The lights stabilized. But then one of the weather screens flashed and went black. The radar went out. Marcus felt the first tightening of concern. The radar was crucial. It showed where the storms were, how strong they were, and where they were moving. "Trying to reboot," Jake said, fingers working the controls. The screen flickered, showed static, went black again. "No response, Captain." Marcus grabbed the radio. "Tower, lightning strike on aircraft. Radar down, requesting alternate route." "Copy, Captain." "We have a significant storm cell ahead, approximately 80 miles out. Suggest deviation to the north. It's the most direct route." Marcus looked at the navigation map. The North Platte Valley lay north of their current course, a natural corridor between higher terrain. It made sense. "Jake, what do you think?" The co-pilot checked the map. "North looks good, Captain. It's shorter, too. Saves fuel." Marcus was about to confirm the route when he felt something strange. It wasn't a thought. It wasn't logic. It was a physical sensation in his chest. Discomfort. Hesitation. He ignored it. Feelings didn't matter. Data did. "Tower, confirm deviation to the nor..." And then it happened. A flash of blue light filled the cockpit. Not from the screens. Not from the instruments. From within the cockpit itself. Marcus turned his head and saw her. A woman was standing between the two pilot seats. No, not standing. Floating slightly, as if gravity had no hold on her, dressed entirely in blue. A simple dress, but of a blue so deep, so radiant, it seemed impossible. A veil over her head framed a face Marcus couldn't fully process. It wasn't beautiful in any conventional sense. It was perfect. In a way that made his eyes sting just to look at it. Absolute compassion in every line, peace that emanated like warmth. She looked directly at him, and pointed, not north, south. The gesture was firm, clear, urgent, south. Go south. Marcus froze completely. His brain trying to process the impossible sight before him. His hand still holding the radio, mid-sentence. 5 seconds, maybe less, maybe more. Time itself seemed to warp. She kept looking at him, those eyes, that impossible peace, that absolute certainty. South. And then she was gone, as if she had never been there at all. The cockpit returned to normal. Normal lights, normal engine sound, everything normal. Except Marcus was trembling. "Captain?" Jake's voice brought him back. "You were saying?" Marcus looked at the co-pilot. Jake was watching him expectantly, waiting for confirmation of the northern route. Did you see her?" Marcus whispered. "See who, Captain?" Marcus glanced at the space where she had been. Empty, just the narrow aisle between the seats. "Nothing, He swallowed hard. His hand still shook. "Tower, change of plans. We're diverting south, Arkansas Valley." "Captain Weber, confirm. Southern route adds 15 minutes. Confirmed south." "Charlot, Captain Weber, may I ask the reason for the change?" "Commander's preference." "Copy that. Authorized southern deviation through the Arkansas Valley. Maintain current altitude." Jake looked at Marcus as if he'd lost his mind. "Captain, north is more direct. The tower suggested north. Why south?" Marcus had no answer. How could he explain? How could he say he'd seen an impossible woman pointing the way? "I just have a feeling about the north." "A feeling?" Jake couldn't hide his disbelief. "Captain, with all due respect, feelings aren't—" "I know." Marcus cut him off, his voice steadier now. Marcus adjusted the course. The plane began to turn smoothly to the right, veering away from the northern route. Jake was silent, but Marcus could feel his disapproval. 15 extra minutes, extra fuel. All because the captain had a feeling. Marcus kept his hands steady on the controls, but inside he was in total chaos. What had he seen? A hallucination? No, impossible. So real, so solid, so present. The light, the blue dress, that face, those eyes, and that peace, that absolute certainty that radiated from her. South, go south, 20 years of flying, 20 years trusting data, instruments, logic, 20 years as a convinced atheist, And in 5 seconds, everything he believed in had been shaken to its core. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Marcus's life. He kept the plane on the southern course, skirting the storm along a longer path. Jake did his job professionally, but was visibly confused by the captain's decision. The storm clouds became visible to the left, huge dark formations pulsing with internal lightning. The Arkansas Valley kept them at a safe distance. Occasional light turbulence, nothing serious, everything normal. And Marcus began to question himself. 15 extra minutes of flight, wasted fuel, a questioning co-pilot. All because of what? A vision, a 5-second delusion. They were almost clear of the storm zone when the radio crackled to life. "Attention on frequency," the controller's voice was tense. "Reports of severe turbulence in the Northern Valley. It wasn't on the radar." Another voice replied, shaken. "Denver confirming. We almost lost control. Extreme turbulence. Didn't show up on radar. We have injuries on board, requesting paramedics in Denver." "Copy that. Medical assistance will be waiting." "All aircraft, avoid the area." Jake slowly turned toward Marcus, his face pale. That's the Northern Valley," he whispered. "The one the tower suggested." Marcus couldn't speak. His hands gripped the controls tightly. "Captain, if we'd gone north, we'd be right there right now." Marcus couldn't process it. It was real. It was really happening. "How did you know?" Jake whispered. "How the hell did you know?" Marcus looked ahead, at the clear sky beyond the windshield. His hands trembling again, but now for a completely different reason. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I saw something." "You saw something? On the radar?" "No. Here, in the cockpit." Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" Marcus took a deep breath. It sounded insane, completely insane, but it was true. A woman, dressed in blue, she pointed south. The silence in the cockpit was deafening. Jake stared at him as if Marcus had completely lost his mind. "Captain, are you saying that—" "I know how it sounds, but I saw her. For 5 seconds, maybe less. She was right there." Marcus pointed to the space between the seats. "Real. Solid. And she pointed south." Jake looked at the spot Marcus was indicating. Empty. Just empty space. "I didn't see anything, Captain." "I know. But I did." They remained silent as the plane glided through the calm sky. In the distance, lightning still pulsed within the clouds. The rest of the flight passed in relative silence. Jake didn't mention the incident again. Marcus flew mechanically, his mind somewhere else. They landed in Denver without any problems. The passengers disembarked as usual, unaware that they had just escaped a catastrophe because of an inexplicable decision. When Marcus and Jake left the cockpit, they were met by the operations supervisor. "Captain Weber, I need to speak with you." Marcus knew what was coming. A debriefing. Why he had changed course against the tower's suggestion. In the office, the supervisor's expression was serious. "Captain, I need to understand your decision to divert south. The tower suggested north. It was more efficient, and you changed it." "Why?" Marcus hesitated. The truth was impossible to tell. "A feeling. I didn't feel comfortable with the northern route." The supervisor studied him. "A feeling." "Yes, sir." "Are you aware of what happened over the North Platte Valley?" "We heard it on the radio." The supervisor sighed. 3 aircraft encountered severe cat, completely invisible. 1 nearly lost control. Another reported injuries and equipment damage. The third had minor structural issues. Pause. "According to your flight timing, you would have entered that area exactly when the turbulence peaked." Marcus felt the weight of the words. All the passengers, the entire crew. "Your intuition saved your plane, Captain. That turbulence didn't appear on any radar. There was no way to know. It was impossible to predict." Pause. "You followed your instinct, and it was the right call. I won't question it further. I just wanted you to know you saved many lives today." After leaving the office, Marcus walked to the crew rest area. He needed a moment alone before heading back to Chicago. He sat in a chair in the corner of the empty room. His hands were still trembling slightly. He had saved 163 lives, plus 6 crew members, 169 people, who would have been injured, or worse, if he had followed logic, data, the tower's recommendation. But he hadn't saved anyone. She had. The woman in blue, the impossible woman who appeared for 5 seconds and changed everything. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to recall every detail. The luminous blue dress, the mantle over her head, the face that radiated impossible peace, the eyes that seemed to see through him, through everything, and that gesture, firm, clear, south. Who was she? For 20 years, Marcus had been absolutely certain that nothing existed beyond the physical world, and in 5 seconds that entire certainty was destroyed, because he had seen, not imagined, not hallucinated, seen, real, impossible to deny. When he returned to Chicago the next morning, Marcus went straight home. He called the company and asked for 3 days off. He said he was feeling unwell, which was true, though not in the way they thought. During the first 2 days, he tried to rationalize. He researched hallucinations, pilot stress, fatigue. He read medical articles about how the brain can create vivid images under pressure. But nothing explained it completely. Nothing captured the solidity of that presence, the absolute reality of those 5 seconds. And there was the undeniable fact. He changed the route. And that saved everyone on the plane. Coincidence? Luck? An inexplicable premonition, or something else? On the 3rd day, Marcus did something he never imagined he would do. He went to a church. He hadn't set foot in one since childhood, baptized Catholic because his mother was, but he never truly believed. He left all that behind in his teenage years. But now, at 54, Marcus pushed open the heavy wooden door of a Catholic church near his apartment and stepped inside. It was almost empty, a Tuesday morning. Only a few elderly people scattered across the pews, praying silently. Marcus walked slowly down the central aisle, not really knowing why he was there. What did he expect to find? There were images on the walls, saints he didn't recognize, a large crucifix on the altar, candles burning in holders, and then he saw it. At the side altar on the left, a statue, not large, maybe 3 feet tall, but unmistakable. A woman dressed in blue. Marcus stopped. His feet refused to move. The blue dress, the veil over her head, the outstretched hands, the expression of peace and compassion. It was her, not exactly. The statue was just painted plaster, obviously. But the resemblance, the proportions, the posture, that impossible blue of the dress. Marcus approached slowly, as if in a dream. A small plaque at the base of the statue, Our Lady, Virgin Mary. Marcus's legs gave way. He dropped onto the nearest pew, unable to take his eyes off the image of the Virgin Mary, the Mother of Jesus, the figure he had rejected all his life, the superstition he had always considered a fairy tale, and she had appeared in his cockpit, real, solid. Marcus began to cry, not quiet tears, deep sobs that shook his entire body, years of absolute certainty crumbling to pieces. "Forgive me," he whispered between sobs, looking up at the statue of the Virgin Mary. "Forgive me. I never believed, never wanted to believe. And you saved us all anyway." One of the elderly women looked toward him with concern but didn't approach. She simply continued her own prayer. Marcus stayed there for a long time, crying, praying for the first time in his adult life. He didn't know how to pray, didn't know the right words. He simply spoke, directly, honestly. "I don't know what to do now. I don't know what this means. But I saw you. I know I saw you." When he finally left the church an hour later, the sun was high. The day went on as usual. Cars passing, people walking, life happening. But for Marcus, nothing would ever be the same again. A week later, Marcus returned to work. His first flight was difficult. Every time he stepped into the cockpit, he glanced at the space between the seats, waiting. For what? For her to appear again? For that moment to have been just a one-time event? But it didn't happen. The flight was normal. All systems worked. No electrical failures, no storms, no impossible decisions. Jake was professional, but Marcus could sense the co-pilot looked at him differently now, with caution, with curiosity, with a hint of fear, perhaps. In the months that followed, Marcus changed in ways other pilots began to notice. He was no longer the cold, distant captain. He greeted the crew with more warmth. He smiled more. There was a gentleness in him that hadn't existed before. And there was something else, a peace, a calmness, even in the most stressful situations. He still wasn't sure about many things. His faith was new, fragile, full of questions. But one thing he was absolutely certain of. That night in April, for 5 impossible seconds, the Virgin Mary had been in the cockpit with them. And he would never feel alone again. Marcus Weber still flies. He's still a captain. He still trusts instruments, data, and protocols. But something is different now. In the pocket of his uniform, he carries a small medal, Our Lady of Guadalupe, a gift from a friend he made at the church he now attends regularly. Before every flight, when he steps into the empty cockpit, Marcus does something he never did in his first 20 years of career. He prays. It's not elaborate. It doesn't follow any formal protocol. It's simply, thank you for being with me. Protect everyone on board. Help me make the right decisions. And look, if you've made it this far, if you've reached the end of Marcus's story, do one thing for me. Write south, in the comments, the direction that made no sense, but saved 169 lives. The direction she pointed to when logic said north. I want to see how many hearts this story truly reached. And every time I read south in the comments, I'll know that one more person believes that the miracles of the Virgin Mary still happen. Now, I want to give a special thanks to the first 20 people who shared their faith in the comments. And remember, the next 20 people who leave comments on this video will also appear in the next one. Thank you for being part of this community of faith. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to renew their hope today. May the Virgin Mary continue to bless and protect you and your family. Amen.